I trusted him for years, but my business partner Carter secretly poisoned my food, drained my $15,000 wedding fund, and sold my house while I was hospitalized. The betrayal left me homeless, traumatized, and isolated until I confronted him in front of everyone during his retirement speech. This is my journey from manipulation, panic attacks, and nightmares to survival and rebuilding trust. I stood in my father's dining room, staring at the family photo on the mantel, and realized something horrifying. The house behind us in that picture, the one with the brick steps and the oak tree Jordan planted when I was 12, was no longer mine. My business partner, Carter, had sold it while I was hooked up to room 4 in a hospital bed, and he hadn't just taken my home. He'd taken the only safe place I ever had. Here's how I got to that moment. I trusted Carter more than anyone outside my family. I thought he was my mentor, my big brother, my protector in the business world. But trust can rot from the inside out, like fruit left too long in the sun, and by the time you smell it, it's already poison. The holiday gathering was supposed to feel like a reset. December 24th, 6:30 p.m. sharp. Pine air fresh and hung heavy in the air, trying to mask the smell of roasting ham. I could hear my dad humming while he checked the wine bottle we'd saved from his wedding anniversary, an expensive Cabernet Sauvignon he swore we'd only open when family truly needed it. I guess he thought tonight qualified. But I couldn't taste food anymore without thinking of the hospital. The weeks where everything I swallowed made me sicker. Later I'd learned why that Carter had been slipping things into my meals at the office to keep me calm. Poison. That's the kind of word that rattles in your brain like a loose marble, never settling. I'd been friends with Carter for nearly 10 years before I made him my business partner. He was older 46, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of confidence that made waiters write his order down twice just to get it right. I was 30, hungry, still scrapping my way into respect. He knew how to play the part of the mentor. He'd clap me on the back and say, "Kid, you've got heart, but you need someone to guard your blind side." I didn't realize I was letting him guard the knife. The first red flag came one Thursday afternoon at school pickup time. I'd left work early to pick up my niece for Jordan, and I got a call from my bank. The manager said Carter had been in early to update our business account. I brushed it off, told myself it was just a miscommunication. I didn't even question why Carter would be in there without me. But later, while waiting outside the school, watching little kids rush into their parents' arms, I felt this twist in my gut. My niece ran up to me, beaming, and asked if we could get ice cream. I said yes, but inside, my chest was tight. Why had Carter needed access alone? Why hadn't he called me first? I should have paid attention. At Christmas dinner that night, Carter sat across from me like he belonged there. He wasn't family, but Jordan had insisted. "He's practically your brother," my dad said, pouring him a glass of that Cabernet. Carter winked at me like it was our secret. "David, you're lucky," Carter said, raising his glass. "Most guys your age don't have a support system like this. Don't screw it up." Everyone laughed, even me, but the words burned. I'd been saving every spare dollar, $15,000 for my wedding fund, tucked into a separate account. Carter knew about it. He even teased me once, said, "That's cute, but love doesn't come with a receipt." Looking back now, I should have been terrified that he even remembered the exact number. I didn't know then that Carter was already scheming with the bank manager. That he'd already started laying the paperwork to sell the house I grew up in, the house Jordan mortgaged his future for so I could have a stable home. Instead, I sat at that holiday table trying to shake off the dizziness that had become so normal. I told myself it was just stress, just end-of-year exhaustion. I didn't know the real reason was sitting across from me, smiling with red-stained teeth from my father's expensive wine. That was the night the first crack formed in the illusion. I didn't see it yet, but it was there, splintering quietly beneath the surface. 3 years later, I can look back at that Christmas dinner and see every warning sign like neon lights. But at the time, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. That's the thing about manipulation, it doesn't happen all at once. It seeps in, year by year, until you can't tell the difference between your own thoughts and the ones someone else planted. The first real fracture happened on March 14, 2020. I was at the office when Carter slid a folder across my desk. Inside were papers for a joint investment, something about leveraging equity for expansion. He made it sound harmless, like moving chess pieces. But when I saw the property address, our family home, 117 Oakview Lane, my stomach dropped. "Why is my house on air?" I asked, my voice cracking. Carter didn't even flinch. "It's just collateral, paperwork, that's all. No one's taking anything. Relax." I tried to push back, but he leaned across the desk and lowered his voice. "David, you trust me, don't you?" And like an idiot, I nodded. Stress started hitting me physically. By summer, my panic attacks were coming daily. I'd be driving to work and suddenly couldn't breathe, gripping the steering wheel while the world tilted sideways. My therapist later said my brain had rewired itself to associate Carter with safety and danger at the same time. That's how control works, you're always off balance, waiting for the next shove. Jordan noticed first. He came by one afternoon, found me curled up on the couch in my work clothes, drenched in sweat. The smell of pine air freshener was overwhelming. I kept spraying it to mask the mildew I swore was in the walls. "Son," he said gently, handing me a glass of water, "this isn't you. Something's eating you alive." I almost told him everything. But then my phone buzzed Carter's name on the screen and I swallowed the words. I hated myself for it. By the fall of 2021, my coworkers had started whispering. I overheard one say, "He's not pulling his weight anymore. Always jittery, always late." They didn't know about the nightmares, the way I'd wake up drenched and shaking because in my dreams Carter was standing over me, pouring something into my food. One guy, Mark, pulled me aside in the break room. He was the kind of coworker who noticed things. He lowered his voice and said, "Look, I don't know if this is my place, but I saw Carter in the bank last week. He was talking with the manager. The short, bald guy looked shady as hell." I brushed him off. I couldn't accept it. Not then. At the same time, I noticed my account shrinking. My $15,000 wedding fund was nearly gone. When I confronted Carter, he laughed. "You're not even engaged. Man, what are you hoarding money for? It's better off circulating." I tried to argue, but he shut me down with that same phrase, "You trust me, don't you?" And each time I said yes, I felt another piece of myself splinter. The real breaking point came one Thursday school pickup time again, because life loves circles. I was waiting for my niece when I got a call from the county clerk's office. A woman's voice, cheerful and oblivious, asked me to confirm details about the sale of 117 Oakview Lane. I froze. I didn't sell my house. There was silence, then an awkward shuffle of papers. "But the documents are already signed, by your partner, Carter Whitman." My chest went tight, my knees buckled. I nearly collapsed right though, and the curb while parents around me hugged their kids. My niece tugged at my hand, asking if I was okay, and I forced a smile that must have looked like a grimace. Inside, something shattered. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the family photo from the mantel, the one with Jordan holding me on his shoulders. I remembered him telling me once, "Home was the one place they can't take from you." But they had. And worse, I had let them. It all hit me like a freight train on April 2, 2022. I was sifting through old emails, trying to make sense of my rapidly unraveling life. Carter had left a digital footprint so sloppy, it was almost laughable, but I couldn't laugh. Not yet. There it was, emails between Carter and the bank manager, the one I thought I could trust. They were talking about reallocating assets and ensuring minimal exposure for me. Translation: they'd been siphoning money from my accounts for months, including the $15,000 wedding fund. Every deposit, every bonus, every carefully saved cent gone. I remember feeling my hands shake so violently I dropped my phone. The pine-scented candle I'd lit to calm my nose smelled suddenly like ash. I could taste the expensive Cabernet my dad had opened that Christmas, bitter now, as if every memory had been contaminated. Then there were the hospital records. My doctor had been concerned about the strange toxins they found in my system during my months of unexplained illness. It wasn't an accident. Carter had been secretly poisoning my food for months. Every anxious night, every nausea-induced meltdown, every unexplained hospital visit, it was him. I felt sick, but not just physically. The betrayal was so deep it rewired my sense of reality. Trust became a currency I no longer had. Friends, colleagues, family, everyone felt like a potential threat. I started therapy immediately. My first session, I sat in Dr. Levin's office on May 10, 2022, hands trembling, recounting the story for the first time. I just don't know if I can believe anyone anymore," I whispered. Dr. Levin nodded. "That's normal. You've been gaslighted, poisoned, financially exploited. Your anxiety and panic attacks are your brain trying to protect you." The social consequences were immediate and crushing. Word got out through the whispers in my office. Co-workers who had once smiled and joked now avoided eye contact. "Did you hear about David?" one colleague asked another in hushed tones. "He got played hard by Carter. Crazy, right?" I overheard it in the hallways. On social media, a few mutual connections posted vague sympathy emojis, but no one reached out personally. Isolation became my constant companion. Even Jordan, my father, felt powerless. He had always been my anchor, but now, standing in my living room surrounded by moving boxes from the house I no longer earned, even he couldn't stop the tide of shame and devastation. I discovered another betrayal thanks to Mark, the suspicious coworker. He'd been warning me for months, but didn't know how to reach me effectively. One rainy afternoon, he cornered me outside the office. "David," he said, for slow, "the accounts, they were never just about your money. Carter's using them for money laundering, legal loopholes, and the adoption. That's why he needed control over your family trust. Everything's connected." My stomach sank. Adoption? Control? Money laundering? The world I thought I knew was gone. Every memory of Carter being my mentor felt like a cruel joke. I started having nightmares almost immediately. Carter's face would appear over me, sometimes grinning as I tried to swallow something, sometimes whispering in my ear, "You trust me, don't you?" I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, every night. Anxiety attacks became so frequent I couldn't work. I tried logging into my computer at home, only to stare blankly at spreadsheets, unable to focus as my mind replayed betrayal after betrayal. Therapy became not just a coping mechanism, but a lifeline. Dr. Levin taught grounding techniques in their sessions to process the trauma, and coping exercises for trust. It was grueling. Even worse, the extent of the betrayal shocked my community. Friends I confided in were horrified. One neighbor refused to shake my hand after learning the story, whispering about how could someone you trust so much. Each reaction felt like salt on an open wound. I remember one incident at a grocery store. The cashier recognized me from an article about the scandal. Her eyes widened, lips pressed together. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she murmured, scanning my groceries quickly. I dropped the wine bottle from that Christmas in the cart. Its cork popped, spilling a few drops, and felt the world collapse a little more. The web of betrayal was far more tangled than I could have imagined. Carter hadn't just taken my house. He'd poisoned my body, my finances, my social standing, my trust in every human being around me. And I realized something chilling. I had been complicit in my own undoing because I had believed in him, defended him when everyone warned me, and thought loyalty would protect me. The stage was set for a confrontation. I needed closure, but more than that, I needed everyone to see the monster behind the mask. I began planning the moment, knowing it would have to be public to truly make an impact. The countdown to exposure began, and nothing would ever be the same. The day of the retirement gala arrived like a storm I couldn't escape. Carter had convinced the board to host a formal dinner at the Grand Elm Ballroom on June 15, 2023, ostensibly to celebrate his 25 years at the company. I'd been dreading it, but after months of therapy and sleepless nights, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. I had to expose him. The ballroom smelled faintly of pine. Someone had brought in air fresheners, and it triggered a memory of that holiday dinner, the first cracks forming in my trust. The tables were polished to reflective shine, candles flickering, and every chair occupied by people who had once respected me. Now, they were here to honor the man who had destroyed my life. I stayed in the back for a while, fingering my phone, where I had screenshots of bank emails, toxicology reports, and transaction histories neatly compiled. My heart pounded in a rhythm I could feel in my jaw. Anxiety bubbled up, threatening to choke me. But I forced myself to breathe. "You've got this, David," I whispered. Carter took the stage, smiling, smooth as ever, glass of that same expensive Cabernet in hand. He started speaking about his legacy, about mentorship, loyalty, and vision. Every word made my chest tighten. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped my notes. Then I saw my cue. I stood up, my legs trembling, and approached the microphone. The room went silent. Carter's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he tried to regain composure. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, voice louder than I thought possible, "I'm here to tell you something about our honoree." Gasps rippled through the room. Forks clinked, and the soft hum of conversation died. "You all know Carter Whitman as a mentor, a friend, a pillar of this company," I said, holding up my phone. "But behind that mask, he's done things none of you would believe. He sold my home while I was hospitalized, drained my $15,000 wedding fund, and most horrifyingly poisoned my food for months. The hospital records, the bank emails, they're all here." A whisper ran through the crowd. Carter's face went pale. His voice, normally smooth and confident, cracked. "David, you can't." "Lush," I shouted, my throat raw. "You can't gaslight everyone anymore. You used my trust, manipulated my family, even the bank manager was in on it, and I know why you adopted me to funnel money and exploit legal loopholes." The room erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor. Some people covered their mouths in shock, others turned to leave. My coworkers, the very same ones who had whispered behind my back about my mental breakdown, were now staring at Carter, jaws tight, eyes wide. Jordan stepped forward from the crowd, placing a hand on my shoulder. "David, I've got your back," he said, his voice steady. It was the anchor I needed. Carter stammered. This is slander, lies." "I have proof," I said, pointing to my phone. I displayed emails, scanned documents, and the hospital toxicology report on the big screen behind the stage. Murmurs grew into shocked exclamations. People turned to Carter, who now looked smaller, less commanding. At one point, Carter lunged toward me, red-faced. "You'll regret this. I've done so much for you." "You've done nothing but destroy me," I shot back. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I didn't stop. "I defended you when everyone warned me. I trusted you when I shouldn't have, and now everyone here knows the truth." The audience sat in stunned silence. A few employees whispered apologies. Mark, my coworker who had warned me years ago, gave me a small nod from the crowd. My heart ached for all the time lost, but at least some justice had been done. Carter's meltdown was complete, shaking, shouting, veins bulging in his neck. Security had to escort him out after he screamed about legal retaliation. I could barely breathe, adrenaline and panic flooded me, but the wave of relief was enormous. After the event, texts and calls poured in. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, former clients, coworkers, even neighbours. The initial shock was painful for everyone, but the truth was finally out. I spent the rest of that night with Jordan, nursing a glass of that old Cabernet. "You did it," he said quietly. "You finally told the truth." I nodded, tasting the bittersweet wine. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift slightly, not entirely gone, but lighter. Carter's carefully curated image had crumbled. And though my life was so fractured, this confrontation was the first real step toward reclaiming it. The morning after the retirement meltdown, I woke up alone in my apartment that I barely recognized as mine. Boxes were scattered from my futile attempts to move in and out in the chaos of the past year. The pine air freshener I had sprayed the night before clung to the room, but it no longer masked the smell of fear and regret that had settled into my skin. My phone buzzed incessantly, texts, emails, notifications, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Every message felt like a spotlight highlighting my humiliation. The anxiety attacks returned with a vengeance. My chest tightened so violently I had to grip the edge of the sink just to breathe. Simple tasks became impossible. Opening emails made my hands tremble. Even the taste of the expensive Cabernet I'd once shared with my dad was bitter and metallic, a visceral reminder of the betrayal I'd endured. Nights were worse. Nightmares of Carter looming over me, grinning while I tried to eat or breathe, kept me awake until the early hours. I would wake drenched in sweat, heart hammering, convinced he was still in the room. I tried to work. I really did. But my coworkers now treated me like I was fragile, unstable. Some avoided me entirely, whispering behind my back, "You think you can take him down, but he's smarter than you," one of them muttered. Others offered forced sympathy, and I hated every moment of it. I had been exposed, humiliated, and left to navigate the wreckage alone. I dove deeper into therapy. Dr. Levin scheduled sessions 3 times a week, sometimes 4. We worked on grounding techniques for the panic attacks, processed the trauma of betrayal, and addressed my insomnia. One day, in mid-July 2023, I said aloud in the office that I felt like a ghost in my own life. She didn't flinch. "That's exactly what trauma does," she said. "You've been gaslighted, poisoned, and financially exploited. Your brain thinks survival means withdrawing." I learned to name the symptoms: panic attacks, nightmares, intrusive thoughts, and a broken trust that extended to every corner of my life. Each session was exhausting. I cried on the floor of her office more than once. I screamed silently into my pillow at night, feeling the shame and isolation weigh heavier than ever. Socially, I became a pariah. Friends who hadn't been directly involved in Carter's schemes distanced themselves, unsure how to relate to someone whose life had imploded in such public fashion. Strangers recognized me from the story that had gone viral online. Grocery clerks, neighbours, even a barista at the corner cafe gave me sympathetic looks that felt like daggers. Whispers followed me everywhere. I could sense the judgment. Poor guy, look what trusting the wrong person can do. Even Jordan felt powerless at times. He tried to help, but seeing him worried and helpless added to my guilt. My home, the one stable anchor in my life, was gone, and with it, the sense of control I had been clinging to for years. I moved temporarily into a small, cheap apartment. Every night, I'd stare at the blank walls haunted by the family photos still tucked in my old office drawer. I thought about Carter constantly, obsessively reviewing every lie, every manipulation, every subtle control he'd exerted. My thoughts became a carousel of paranoia and fear. Trust felt impossible. Money was another constant stressor. With the $15,000 wedding fund gone and my accounts tampered with, even basic bills felt like mountains. I had no financial safety net. Every decision came with crushing anxiety: pay rent, eat, survive. Carter had not just stolen my home, he stripped me of stability itself. By late July, my mental health had deteriorated to the point where even therapy sessions felt like survival exercises. One evening, after an attack left me sobbing on the floor of my apartment, Dr. Levin said something that stuck. You are allowed to grieve everything that was stolen from your home, trust, reputation, but the key is to not let grief become permanent isolation. It felt impossible at the time. Every day was a struggle to stand, to eat, to exist in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. Even the simple act of going outside, past neighbours who knew this story, was a Herculean task. Yet, in that darkness, a seed of determination began to grow. I realised that while Carter had taken so much, he could not take my will to fight. The confrontation at the retirement gala had been the first real act of reclaiming my life. Now, the work was internal, psychological, and painstaking. I wouldn't be whole overnight. But for the first time, I understood that rebuilding wasn't about erasing the trauma, it was about learning to live with it, to integrate it, and eventually, to rise above it. Recovery didn't arrive like a miracle. It crept in fragments, one therapy session at a time, one small victory in a sea of panic attacks and sleepless nights. By August 2023, I had begun setting up a structured routine: morning meditation, journaling, and weekly endo sessions with Dr. Levin. My anxiety attacks didn't vanish, but I learned to anticipate them, name them, and ground myself before they spiraled out of control. I started attending a local support group for survivors of manipulation and financial betrayal. Sitting in that circle for the first time, I expected pity or judgment. Instead, I found understanding. Each person shared stories of trust broken and lies overturned. I recognized fragments of my own story in their experiences. By listening, I realized I wasn't alone. We swapped practical advice, legal resources, financial rebuilding, and techniques to cope with panic and nightmares. Slowly, a community formed around me, a safety net woven from shared understanding. The first breakthrough came one rainy Thursday evening when Mark, the coworker who had warned me years ago, texted, "Want to meet? Coffee." I hesitated, remembering how distant the office had become. But when we sat down, he simply said, "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." That simple acknowledgement of my pain cracked something open inside me. I realized that trust wasn't gone forever, it had just been buried under layers of betrayal. I also began repairing my finances, working with a financial advisor who specialized in fraud recovery. We recovered a portion of the funds Carter had drained, including some of the $15,000 wedding fund. Every deposit felt like reclaiming a small piece of my identity. The legal process was grueling, but it taught me resilience. By November 2023, I had a modest, stable account I could rely on, a tangible symbol of control regained. Therapy remained central. I documented every panic attack, every nightmare, and every intrusive thought. I learned to identify triggers: the smell of pine, the taste of certain foods, even references to trust. Slowly, these triggers lost their paralyzing power. I practiced visualization, imagining Carter shrinking in size, losing his hold over me. It was empowering in a surreal way. On the personal side, I rebuilt connections with my father and friends. Jordan and I started a tradition of walking every Saturday morning, talking about everything and nothing. One day, he gestured to the family photo on the mantel. "You can put it back," he said, smiling. And I did it not as a relic of loss, but as a symbol of survival. I also began volunteering with the same support group I had joined. Listening to others, offering guidance, sharing my journey, helping people navigate the same betrayal I had endured, it gave me purpose. Every time someone told me, "You understand me like no one else does," I felt the spark of pride and healing. This network became my family, a community built not on deception but on mutual support and resilience. By January 2024, I could walk into rooms without the weight of hypervigilance, check my accounts without dread, and even laugh again without fear. The nightmares didn't vanish entirely, but they became stories I could acknowledge without letting them define me. I had built walls, yes, but they were protective, not imprisoning. I realized that Carter's actions, while devastating, had inadvertently forced me to cultivate inner strength I might never have discovered otherwise. My life was fractured, but the pieces had been reshaped into something new, resilient. Looking at myself in the mirror one morning, I barely recognized the trembling, hollow-eyed man from 3 years ago. I saw someone cautious, yes, but also capable of joy, trust, and connection. I could taste wine again without fear. I could walk into a store and meet a stranger's gaze without paranoia. I had rebuilt a life grounded not in illusions, but in reality, and for the first time in years, I felt ownership of it. I know recovery isn't linear, and the scars will always remain, but I've learned that betrayal, no matter how deep, doesn't define the survivor. I built a network of people who understand the journey, who witness my growth, and who remind me that life can continue beyond trauma. Every step forward is proof that trust, self-worth, and resilience can be rebuilt even after someone tried to destroy them. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it was possible to live fully.